Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the mining operation destroy another section of the moon below. The massive drill cut through rock and ice, pulling out rare minerals worth billions in trade. Every drill cut killed more of the creatures that lived in the deep caves. Hayes had been studying this moon for 3 days now, and he knew the truth. The species lived here for over 10,000 years. They were intelligent, peaceful, and now they were being wiped out. Hayes was 45 years old and had commanded human ships for 20 years. He was strong and smart, but more important, he had principles. He did not look away from problems because they were difficult. He did not follow orders that went against what was right. "Sir, we are receiving a message from the mining station," said Lieutenant Sarah Cooper. She was young, only 28, but she was one of the best officers on the Discovery. Her hands moved across the controls and the message played across the speaker. "Human vessel, this is Station Alpha. This moon and its resources are now claimed under authority. You will leave this sector immediately. The people are conducting legal mining operations under Galactic Council approval. Any interference will be seen as an act of war." Hayes felt anger rise in his chest. They had no right to destroy these creatures. They had no moral authority to make this choice. The Galactic Council had approved this because they did not care about smaller species. They did not care about the innocent lives being ended every second. "Send a reply," Hayes said. His voice was calm but firm. "Tell them to stop the mining immediately. They have 1 hour to shut down the operation. If they do not comply, we will use force to shut them down ourselves." Cooper looked at him with surprise. "Sir, they have been spacefaring for over 500,000 years. We are only 200 years into space exploration. They have weapons that could destroy our ship in minutes." Hayes knew this was true. The Discovery was a small ship, designed for exploration and science, not for combat. But some things were more important than survival. Some things were about who you were as a person and as a species. "I know what we are up against," Hayes said, "and I know what we will lose if we do nothing. Those creatures down there will be extinct by morning. We cannot allow that to happen." The hour passed slowly. Hayes watched the mining continued. They did not even acknowledge the warning. At the end of the hour, Hayes gave the order. "Launch missiles at the primary drill site," he commanded. The Discovery's weapon systems were not designed for this. They were defensive systems, meant for protection during emergencies. But Hayes used them now with purpose. The missiles streaked down to the moon's surface and hit the main drilling equipment. The massive machines exploded in fire and smoke. The mining operation came to a complete stop. For a moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then 3 massive warships appeared on the scanner. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel right above the Discovery. They were ships, and they were enormous. Each one was 3 times the size of the Discovery. "This is Supreme Commander of the Fleet," came a cold voice through the communications system. "You have committed an act of aggression against the people and destroyed valuable mining equipment. By law, your ship must be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to surrender, or we will open fire." Hayes did not hesitate. "I will not surrender. Stand by for combat." Cooper looked at him with fear and respect in her eyes. She did not argue or ask questions. She moved to her station and began preparing the Discovery's weapons and defenses. The rest of the crew did the same. They were human. They might not be the strongest or the most advanced, but they were brave. The first volley from the ships came 30 seconds later. Energy weapons blazed across space. The Discovery's shields took the hit and held, but just barely. Hayes felt the ship shake. Alarms began to sound. Some of the crew fell from their chairs. "Return fire," Hayes ordered. The Discovery's weapons were weaker, but they were accurate. The human crew had trained hard for moments like this. A beam struck one of the ships and damaged its shield generator. The commander seemed surprised that the small human ship could hurt them. Hayes knew they could not win through direct combat. The ships were too powerful, but Hayes had an advantage they did not expect. He had a crew of humans who would think of solutions no one else would try. Engineering, I need everything you have. Push the shields to maximum. Reroute all power from non-essential systems, Hayes said. Sir, that will leave us vulnerable in many areas, Engineer Brown replied. I know, do it anyway, Hayes said. The Discovery began to move in ways they did not expect. Hayes had studied the ships through the observations of many previous human encounters. He knew where their sensors were weak. He knew where the cooling systems were located. And he knew something that most species forgot. Humans could do impossible things when they had no other choice. Move us inside the range of their main weapons, Hayes ordered. Get us close to that ship on the left. They were shocked. Their weapons were designed to fight at long range. As the Discovery moved closer, those weapons became less effective. The smaller human ship was moving faster than they expected, turning sharper than should be possible. Hayes was not thinking about winning anymore. He was thinking about survival. He was thinking about those creatures on the moon below. He was thinking about what it meant to be human. The battle was just beginning, but Hayes knew that today, humanity would either prove something important to the galaxy, or they would die trying. The battle raged around the Discovery as Hayes commanded his crew with calm focus. The ships continued to fire their powerful weapons, but the smaller human vessel moved like water, slipping through the energy beams that were meant to destroy it. Hayes had ordered the ship to fly dangerously close to the first warship. Now they could not use their main weapons without risking hitting each other. Launch all drones, Hayes commanded. 20 small combat drones launched from the Discovery. Each drone was no bigger than a person's hand, but each carried explosives and specialized equipment. The human engineers had designed them for one purpose: to slip into enemy ships and disable them from the inside. The commander was still arrogant. They did not see the threat of these tiny machines. By the time they understood what was happening, the drones had already found their way into the first warship's ventilation systems. Engineer Brown was leading a team in the Discovery's engine room. He was watching the sensor displays that showed the drones moving through the ship like insects inside a building. Drones are in position, Brown said into the communication system. Ready to activate on your command, Captain. Hayes was sweating now. His hands gripped the armrest of his chair. Every choice he made could kill his crew or save thousands of lives on the moon below. But he did not let doubt stop him. Activate the drones. The small explosions started inside the first warship. Not massive explosions that would destroy the ship, but targeted hits on critical systems. The power generators, the shield controls, the weapon systems. One by one, the ship's abilities shut down. The great warship went dark, floating dead in space. The other two ships broke formation and moved away from the Discovery. They realized now that they could not fight this small human vessel the way they had planned. Supreme Commander's voice came across the communications system, and his tone had changed. There was anger now and something else. Fear. You are using tricks that are beneath a warrior species, said. We will destroy you with brute force. Both remaining ships pulled back and began firing long-range weapons again. But Hayes had already predicted this. He had moved the Discovery away from the first ship and was now using its dead hull as a shield. The weapons hit their own ship's body instead of the Discovery. That will not work much longer, Cooper said. They are repositioning. In 30 seconds they will have a clear line of fire. Hayes was already thinking ahead. Helm, take us toward the asteroid field, full speed. The Discovery raced toward a cluster of asteroids that floated in space near the moon. The two ships followed, their weapons still firing. But the Discovery was smaller and more maneuverable. It slipped between the asteroids while the larger ships had to take longer routes around them. Hayes had studied the asteroids through the observation systems over the past 3 days. He knew which ones had radioactive cores. He knew which ones were unstable. Now he used that knowledge as a weapon. "Fire on the asteroid marked Delta 7, Hayes said. A laser beam from the Discovery struck the asteroid. It was already unstable, and the impact caused it to begin to break apart. Chunks of rock and ice moved in unexpected directions, floating into space. One of the ships tried to maneuver around the debris, but it was too large and too slow. Pieces of the asteroid struck its hull, creating small breaches. The ship's shields flickered and went down. Now only one ship remained. Supreme Commander must have understood that the Discovery was not just a science vessel anymore. It was a weapon in the hands of a captain who would not accept defeat. Made his choice. He turned his ship around and began to jump to faster-than-light speed. "Should we pursue?" Cooper asked. "No," Hayes said. "Let him go. Let him carry the message back to the Galactic Council. Let them know what happened here today." The Discovery turned back toward the moon. The mining operation that they had started was silent now. The machines were destroyed. The creatures in the caves below had survived. The cost had been high. The Discovery had taken damage. Some of the crew had been injured, but they had won. Over the next few hours, Hayes received messages from across the galaxy. News traveled fast through the space stations and communication networks. A human ship had faced 3 warships and had destroyed them. The who had ruled the stars for 500,000 years had been defeated by a species that had been in space for only 200 years. Some species were impressed, others were frightened, but the Galactic Council understood something that had not occurred to them before. They had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that humanity was weak because humans were young. They had assumed that humans would follow the old rules because they did not have the power to break them. They had been very wrong. Within hours, an emergency message arrived from the Council. It was short and clear. It said that humanity had declared war on the people and, by extension, on the Galactic Council itself. The message called for the complete elimination of all human ships and stations. It called for humanity to be wiped from existence. Hayes read the message and showed no emotion on his face, but inside, he knew that everything had changed. The battle at the moon was not the beginning of the war. It was just the first moment of understanding. The real war would be much larger and much more difficult. He looked at his crew, each one of them standing at their station, waiting for the next command. They were scared, but they were also ready. They were human. And today, humanity had proven to the entire galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. "Set a course for Earth," Hayes commanded. "We need to warn them. The Galactic Council is coming, and they are coming for all of us." The Discovery began to move toward home, carrying news that would change everything. The news of the battle at the moon spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Species that had lived under Galactic Council rule for millions of years began to talk in secret. Humans were different. Humans could fight back. Humans could win. But the Council's response was also swift and powerful. They called an emergency assembly, and they made a decision that would shake the galaxy to its core. The Galactic Council announced that humanity was now classified as a Level 1 threat. This meant only one thing. Humanity had to be destroyed completely. The Council began to marshal its forces. Warships from 100 different species were called to join the effort. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen was being assembled to eliminate the human race from existence. Captain Hayes received this news while the Discovery was still 3 weeks away from Earth. He called an emergency meeting with the high command of the human military. Through quantum communication, he spoke with Admiral Victoria Price, who commanded all human military forces. Price was a woman in her 60s, strong and experienced. She had served in the human military for 40 years. "The Council is gathering their forces," Hayes said. "They are not just sending a response fleet. They are preparing for total war. We have maybe 3 months before they are ready to attack Earth directly." Admiral Price's face was serious but not afraid. "What do you recommend, Captain?" "We need to do 2 things at the same time," Hayes said. First, we need to prepare for war. We need to build new ships, train new soldiers, and create weapons that can match the Council's forces. Second, we need to find allies. There are species in the galaxy who are tired of Council rule. There are species who have suffered under their control. If we can find them and unite them, we might have a chance. Price nodded slowly. I will begin the military preparations, but finding allies will be harder. Most species are afraid of the Council. Who would be brave enough to stand against them? That was a good question. Hayes did not have an answer yet, but he knew that the first step was to try. 2 days later, the Discovery received an unexpected message. It came from a small diplomatic vessel from the species. The message was encrypted and private. Hayes was confused. They were known to be peaceful traders, not warriors. They rarely became involved in political conflicts. Hayes opened the message, and a face appeared on his screen. The being was, with smooth blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. Her name was Ambassador, and she spoke excellent human language with only a slight accent. Captain Hayes, I represent a group of species who are very interested in what you have done. We have watched the Galactic Council rule for too long. We have seen them crush smaller species and take their resources. We have seen them make decisions based on power, not justice. Your actions at the moon have shown us something we had almost forgotten. Change is possible. Resistance is possible. I want to help you, but I must ask you something first. Are you fighting only to survive, or are you fighting for something more? Hayes thought carefully about the answer. He could have said that he was fighting to save humanity. That would have been true, but it was not the whole truth. We are fighting for justice, Hayes said. We are fighting to stop the Council from destroying innocent species just for profit. We are fighting to prove that might does not make right. If you believe in those things, then we need each other. Smiled, and Hayes saw respect in her eyes. Then you have found your first true ally. I will send you a list of species who are tired of Council control. These are species who have resources, technology, and warriors. More importantly, they have a reason to believe that change is possible because you have shown them it is. Over the next weeks, Hayes began to communicate with representatives from a dozen different species. Some were warriors who wanted a chance to fight. Others were scientists and traders who were tired of the Council's control. Some were diplomats who saw an opportunity to reshape the galaxy's political power. Slowly, a coalition began to form. But the Council was not waiting. They were moving faster than anyone expected. The first reports came of Council forces gathering at several stations. They were building a massive strike force. The plan was simple and brutal. They would gather everything they had and attack Earth directly. They would destroy the human and all human settlements in one massive assault. There would be no escape, no second chances, no mercy. Admiral Price worked day and night to prepare Earth's defenses. But even with new technology and training, Earth could not stand alone against the entire Galactic Council. They needed the allies that Hayes was bringing together. Hayes arrived at Earth 3 weeks later with the discovery and preliminary agreements from 4 different species. Each one had promised military support. It was not enough for victory, but it was enough to give humanity a chance to survive. At the Military Command Center on Earth, Hayes met with Admiral Price for the first time in person. They looked at the same maps and saw the same terrifying reality. The Council's fleet would be in position to attack Earth in less than 2 months. Humanity and their new allies would need to stop them, but the odds were terrible. We need to do more than just defend, Hayes said. We need to make the Council afraid of us. We need to show them that attacking us would be a mistake they could never recover from. Price looked at him with understanding. You want to strike first? Yes, Hayes said. Not to start a war, but to show them that we are willing to fight anywhere at any time. We need to hit their supply lines, their communication stations, their weapons factories. We need to make them understand that they are not facing a weak species trying to survive. We are facing a species that will fight to the end. The plan was dangerous and bold, But Hayes knew that if they did nothing, they would lose everything. The humans of Earth and the hope of billions of beings across the galaxy depended on what they did in the next 2 months. Price extended her hand to Hayes. "We fight together then, for Earth, for justice, for everyone tired of council rule." Hayes shook her hand. The gathering storm was coming, but now humanity would not face it alone. The coalition of free species was not what anyone had expected. It was not an organized military alliance with clear chains of command and shared strategies. Instead, it was a desperate gathering of beings who had all been hurt by Galactic Council rule and saw in humanity a chance for something new. They brought trade networks and information. The merchant people brought resources and knowledge of the Council's supply routes. The warriors brought combat expertise and weapons technology that had been locked away for generations. But the most important allies came from within the Council itself. There were species that had served the Council for millions of years, but they were beginning to question whether that service was worth the cost. Some of them had children and wanted a better galaxy for the next generation. Others simply believed that what Hayes was saying about justice and fairness was true and important. The most shocking defection came from the medical corps. Despite what Supreme Commander had declared, not all believed that total war was the right answer. A group of younger officers who had studied human biology and psychology began to see that humans were not an enemy to be destroyed, but a species to be understood. They started to secretly provide the coalition with information about military strategy and weaknesses. Captain Hayes now found himself leading something he had never expected to lead. He was not just a ship captain anymore. He was a symbol. Across the galaxy, beings who wanted change looked to him. News broadcasts showed his face and told his story. The media called him the human who refused to surrender. Some species called him a revolutionary. Others called him a criminal. But everyone agreed that he was changing the galaxy. The coalition launched its first major strike against the Galactic Council. They targeted the supply stations that fed the Council's war fleet. The merchants provided the exact locations. The warriors provided the soldiers. They provided the diplomatic cover story that allowed the coalition fleet to move without being detected. And the humans provided the tactical planning and the will to win. The battle was fierce, but it was a victory. The coalition destroyed enough supplies to delay the Council's planned attack by 3 months. More importantly, the victory proved something crucial. The Council was not invincible, and the coalition of free species could actually work together. But success brought new problems. As word of the coalition's victory spread, more species wanted to join. Some were genuine allies who believed in the cause of freedom. Others were opportunists who saw a chance to benefit from the chaos. Hayes had to manage not just military operations but political negotiations between species that had been enemies for thousands of years. Ambassador became essential to this work. She understood the politics of the galaxy in ways that Hayes could never learn. She knew which species could be trusted and which ones would betray the coalition if it served their interests. She knew which leaders needed to be pushed and which ones needed to be convinced through reason. "You are becoming the Galactic Council's greatest nightmare," told Hayes during a private conversation. "Not because of your weapons or your tactics, but because you are showing the galaxy something they thought was impossible. You are showing them that species can work together based on shared values instead of shared fear." Hayes understood what she meant. The Galactic Council had maintained power for millions of years not through superior force, but through division. They had kept species apart, made them compete with each other, and convinced them that cooperation was impossible. Now humanity was proving them wrong. The defections from the Council's own forces began to increase. An entire fleet of warships refused orders to attack coalition positions. A group of officers helped the coalition capture a major weapons facility. The species, who had supplied the Council's military for 100,000 years, began to sell weapons to the coalition instead. The Galactic Council's response was fury and fear. They declared all defectors to be criminals and enemies. They threatened any species that helped humanity with complete destruction. But the more they threatened, the more species began to question whether the Council deserved their loyalty at all. The turning point came at a place called the Neutral Station, a massive space structure that had been the meeting point for all galactic governments for over 1,000,000 years. The Galactic Council called for a final vote on what to do about humanity. They demanded that all member species either commit all their forces to a total war against humans or be branded as traitors themselves. What happened surprised everyone. Over half of the Council's member species voted to reject the total war strategy. They voted instead for negotiations with humanity and the coalition of free species. Some of them had been influenced by defectors in their governments. Others simply had come to believe that the Council's time had passed. The head of the Galactic Council, an ancient being named Archon Melas who had ruled for 500,000 years, was shocked and enraged. He declared that the Council still had the power to enforce its will. He ordered the remaining loyal forces to prepare for war against the combined resistance of humanity, the coalition, and the defectors. But his power was already broken. Within days, the military forces he controlled began to crumble. Entire units refused orders. Weapons systems were sabotaged by officers who no longer believed in the Council's cause. The magnificent machine of Galactic Council rule, which had seemed eternal and unbreakable, was falling apart because the beings inside it no longer believed in it. Hayes stood in a command center on Earth and watched the strategic situation change by the hour. What had started as humanity's fight for survival had become something larger. It had become the galaxy's fight for a new future. He thought about the creatures on the moon that had started all of this. He thought about Captain Daniel Hayes, who had refused to look away from injustice. He thought about what it meant to be human. "Sir," Admiral Price said, approaching him with a message. "We are receiving a communication request from Archon Melas. He wants to negotiate terms." Hayes read the message carefully. The ancient ruler of the galaxy was finally accepting reality. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for 1,000,000 years, was coming to an end. Humanity and the coalition had not destroyed it through conquest. They had destroyed it by showing that another way was possible. "Tell him we are ready to talk," Hayes said. "But we talk as equals now. The age of the Council ruling the galaxy is over. The age of shared decision-making and true justice has begun." The response came quickly. Archon Melas agreed. For the first time in 1,000,000 years, the rulers of the galaxy would sit down as equals and build something new together. And they would do it because one human captain had refused to accept that some things were unchangeable. The negotiations took place at the Neutral Station, the same place where the Galactic Council had ruled for over 1,000,000 years. Captain Hayes stood in the Great Assembly Hall, a space so massive that it could hold thousands of representatives from hundreds of species. This time, the hall was filled with beings who came with hope instead of fear. Archon Melas sat on his ancient throne, his face marked by countless centuries of rule. He looked at Hayes with an expression that was hard to read. Respect, perhaps, or resentment, or maybe both. The old ruler had spent his entire existence at the top of a hierarchy. Now he was being forced to accept equality with species he had once considered beneath his notice. "Humanity emerged from nothing," Melas said, his voice still powerful despite his age. 200 years ago, your species did not even know about faster-than-light travel. Now you stand here and demand that the Galactic Council bow to your principles. How can I not see this as the ultimate arrogance?" Hayes had prepared for this question. He understood the pain behind it. "You are right that we are new to space and to galactic civilization, but being new does not make us wrong. We did not choose this war. We chose to protect the innocent. The mining operation was destroying a species that had done nothing to harm anyone. We could not accept that. We could not stand by and do nothing. That is what humanity has always done. We protect each other. We protect the weak. We do not turn away from injustice, because it is hard, or because someone else is more powerful than us. An ambassador from the species stood next. What Captain Hayes says is true. We have served the Council for millions of years. We have followed your rules and obeyed your commands, but we have seen the cost. We have watched smaller species become extinct when they were not profitable. We have seen resources stolen and civilizations destroyed. We supported humanity because we wanted change. But we would support them now regardless because they have shown us something the Council forgot long ago. They have shown us what it means to have honor and principles. Other species spoke. The merchants talked about their suffering under Council economic rules. The warriors talked about the wars the Council had forced them to fight for profit. Even some officers spoke, telling stories of missions they had been ordered to carry out that violated their own moral codes. Archon Melas listened to all of it. At the end of the day, he stood and walked to a place in the center of the assembly hall. Every being in the room watched and waited to hear what the last true ruler of the old Galactic Council would say. I have lived for 600,000 years, Melas said. I have seen species rise and fall. I have seen technologies that would have been considered magic become ordinary. I have held power that was absolute and unquestioned, and I have used that power to maintain order and stability in the galaxy. But I have also used it to maintain my position. That, I now understand, is not the same thing as maintaining what is right. He paused, and many beings felt that he was struggling with the words. The Galactic Council as it has existed will end today. We will become something new. A true council where all species have equal voice, where decisions are made based on justice, not power, where a species that has been in space for 200 years can stand equal with one that has ruled for 600,000. I accept these terms not because I have lost the military power to reject them, but because I have come to believe that what humanity proposes is better than what we had before. The assembly chamber erupted in sound. Some beings cheered, others simply nodded with quiet satisfaction. Hayes felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The war was ending. The victory was complete, but it had not been won through weapons and violence. It had been won through the unwillingness to compromise on what was right. What followed was the most important military action of the entire conflict. The Galactic Council's remaining forces were ordered to stand down. Most of them obeyed without hesitation. The soldiers and officers were tired of fighting a war they no longer believed in. They returned to their home worlds and their families. The great war that everyone had feared would destroy civilization simply ended because the beings who had been ordered to fight it decided they did not want to fight anymore. Over the next weeks and months, the coalition of free species became the new Galactic Alliance. It was a federation of equals, where each species had voice and vote equal to all others regardless of age or power. It was not perfect. There were conflicts between species with different values and goals, but the conflicts were solved through negotiation and compromise, not through force and dominance. Captain Hayes was offered positions of great power and authority. He was offered seats on the new Galactic Alliance Council. He was offered command of the entire combined military forces. He refused all of it. Instead, he asked for one thing. He asked to be given the resources to help the species recover from the mining damage and return to health. He asked to be the first ambassador of the human species to the new alliance, working to build bridges between humanity and the billions of other beings in the galaxy. The discovery of what humans had accomplished spread through the galaxy like wildfire. A species that had been seen as weak and insignificant had changed the structure of galactic civilization itself. Every young species now had hope. The message was clear. You do not have to accept oppression because someone is more powerful than you. You can stand up. You can change things. You can win not through conquest but through courage and principles. Admiral Victoria Price remained in command of human military forces, but she spent much of her time in peacetime planning. She worked with military leaders from 100 different species to create a combined defense force that would protect the galaxy from any external threats. It was difficult work, but it was the work of building something that would last. 3 years after the battle at the Moon, Captain Hayes stood once again on the bridge of the Discovery. The ship had been repaired and upgraded with technology from a dozen different species. It was no longer just a human exploration vessel. It was a symbol of unity and cooperation. Hayes looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had happened. He thought about his crew, many of whom had died or been injured. He thought about the creatures on the Moon that had started everything. He thought about the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy and finally accepted that their time had passed. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had once seen humans as nothing. Lieutenant Sarah Cooper approached him on the bridge. "Captain, we are ready to begin our first diplomatic mission. We are heading to the outer regions to make contact with a species that has never interacted with the galactic community before." Hayes smiled. This was what humanity was meant to do, not to conquer or dominate, but to explore and connect and build together. "Set course," he ordered. "Let us show them what humanity has become." As the Discovery jumped to faster-than-light speed, the stars around it seemed to shine brighter. The galaxy had changed. The age of absolute rulers had ended. The age of cooperation and justice had begun, and it had all started because one captain refused to look away from injustice. The message spread across the stars. Humanity had declared war on oppression itself, and against all odds they had won.